Happy Wonder Wednesday, everyone, and welcome back to our Floxies community live show. I hope you're doing well wherever in the world you're joining us from. And as I always say during our live streams, please drop a comment in the chat if you're watching us now live and tell me where you're from and tell me whether you're a designer, a Webflow developer, and if this is your first time here watching our live stream. We're Floxies, an international community for women in UX UI design and Webflow development. And we gather here almost every Wednesday, inviting influential speakers from either the design or the Webflow space or from our community to come and teach you all they know about these particular topics. And I have to say, we have some really talented women in our community. And so I'm always very excited to be hosting these streams for them because I think they're absolutely great. And the value that we're able to share to you for free is just priceless, right? And so without further ado, let me get into it. We use something called GatherTown, which is our beautiful office here that I'm gonna show you in a second. So here we go. This is our co-working space where we get together on a Monday and we do some focused work together. As you can see, we all have our cute little desks. And I could give you a tour of the space. Maybe let me know if that's if that's something that you would like to see. But for today's event, I'm just gonna walk into the auditorium. Here we go.
Thing I have struggled with my whole career is just
and here's
to
the
make it
rest
look
of the
like.
Floxies. Hi everyone, happy Wonder Wednesday. We're live with all our friends. I don't know if we do have friends, but if you're here, if you're watching, maybe let us know again in the comments. But we are here in the gather with all our friends, and I know that that's for sure because I can see so many of you here. And we're very excited to be back on week 2 of our Floxies Summer Camp, which is our very new initiative. And I was just saying, in our introduction that we're so very fortunate to have such talented women like Aga, Irina, and actually everyone in this room as well. But just like the value that we're able to share during our live streams is just incredible because I don't know, I don't often get to attend events that can teach and educate people in such a lovely manner and with such deep knowledge and expertise. So thank you again, Aga and Irina, for being our special guests today. As lesson 2 of our Floxies summer camp, today we're going to be talking about typography. And I don't know, maybe Irina, if you would like to give us a quick recap of what we've done last week.
Okay, yes. So last week we talked about first stages of web design, about research stage, and then how we apply all that knowledge that we got during research stage, how we create our strategy and apply it to creating a wireframe, which is like a skeleton of the website. And now today we'll dip a bit more into like visual elements, and we'll start with typography.
Love that so much. And just as an overview of the whole camp, Irina, Aga, and I just sat down one day and we were just like talking about all the amazing projects that we see happening, inside of our community and all the most frequent questions that we get in our forum. And something that was really clear to us and that came up in our conversations was that lots of people do want to do so many things all at once. They want to rush because that's life nowadays. Like everyone is like under this pressure that we have to be on top of everything, we have to be fast, we have to be performing, and we have to be visible on social media, and you have to do all those things all at once. And when you end up into that sort of whirlwind, then you somehow start losing what the fundamentals are. And so that's the reason why we wanted to get together for like a chilled, informal 4 weeks summer camp where we have our experts here that are exactly going to do that, and so teach us all the fundamentals so that we can get a good foundation and then we can build on top of that. And Aga, you were able to also host an office hour for our Floxies, and so did you have the chance to practice what we discussed in week one?
Yeah, actually, I think that it was really a nice session with all amazing Floxies that took part in the session as well. And most of you, a lot of you chose to work on their own project as well, which is really amazing that you are trying to implement the knowledge in your own work, life projects. And this is truly awesome. And I cannot wait what you're going to do with this typography knowledge pack that Irina is going to explore with us today.
Amazing. And maybe if we do have time before we wrap up today, if anyone would like to volunteer and show us what they worked on during the office hour, the stage is yours. I can see Emma's got her hand up. I love that. Amazing. So without further ado, should we get started, Irina?
Yeah, let's get started because it's a big topic.
It's a big beast. And yeah, again, all these topics that we're presenting to you, again, they're the fundamentals, teaching you the very specific foundations and the critical things you need to learn. But it goes without saying that if you're particularly interested in exploring any of these topics that we will be discussing during our summer camp, please feel free to dive deeper into them and use our community to ask any further questions. But I'm done talking. Irina, over to you.
Okay, fantastic. So let's do it. So typography is a very vast topic, and my favorite. It's absolutely true. And today we'll focus on web typography, which is still a very big topic, but we'll try to cover most important like bits and pieces and basics. So as always, I like to start with a quote, and Oliver Reichenstein, it's some person who founded information architect agency. He said in 2006, web design is 95% typography. And yeah, it was a while ago. And even back then, some people might argue about exact percentage. But one thing that is totally like true, that it makes up a big part of typography, makes up a big part of web design. Because if you think about most of information that we consume on web, it's text, it's in written form. So how we present that text is crucial. It's really important. So we'll focus on web typography today, and we'll start with a bit of a terminology, so that kind of like these words you might hear when you talk about typography, and I want you to be absolutely sure that you know what they mean. And you probably know most of them, but we'll go quickly through them. So usually, like originally, typeface was a name for like a set of characters, specific set of characters that, I mean, the characters are the same, but having a specific design. So for example, it's like Times New Roman or Arial or Helvetica. And font is a variation of that typeface. And why was it so? Because when it was used for printing, so they had like different sets for for different, like, bold or italic or even different size. You would have like a different sets of these little metal things that they used. Sorry, I'm not sure what they're called. So that would be a font, but the whole family that is has a like specific design, it was called a typeface. So example of font would be like Arial, bold, and you could even include like specific size. But there is a but that nowadays most of people, when they say font, they usually mean typeface. And I think it's totally fine because we understand what we're talking about. So I don't think it's very important now, and it's totally fine. So sometimes I might say font when I actually mean typeface. So what else? If you other specific terms, kerning kerning is adjustment of space between individual letters, individual pairs of letters. So like, for example, between, I don't know, T and Y. So usually we don't really use kerning in web design because first of all, one of the reasons it's not supported like purely by CSS, and you can use some tricks to apply it, but yeah. And second, it's usually not needed. You might only need it if you have like a really big, large titles, and you can see some kind of like not very balanced spacing between letters. You might want to apply it, but in most cases, no. And it is used in logo design and branding. So tracking is an adjustment of space between all letters. So we make that space between all letters either like a bit wider or more narrow. So that's what we're mostly talking about in web design. And to do that, this tracking, we use letter spacing setting. And I'm talking now about Figma, where most of people design, or Webflow, where we build. Again, most of our participants, if they are developers. So we use that letter spacing setting to adjust tracking. And leading is space between two lines. And to adjust that, we use a line height setting. So there is kerning, tracking, and leading. In web design, we'll mostly be talking about tracking and leading. And when we talk about it, we'll talk about letter spacing and line height. And then there are two things, such as you often hear it when we talk about typography. They're legibility and readability. Legibility is basically, I would say it's a quality of a font, how easily you can recognize individual characters, how easy it is to read. And readability is more of a quality of the whole block of text. Like, for example, if text is too tight or something like that, you want to achieve good readability. And this often kind of like overlap a bit. Like, for example, if font has a bad legibility, you're not going to have a good readability. But the difference is that legibility is more about specific qualities of font, and readability about how you perceive the whole text. And now I included a little bit kind of like anatomy of font, a little image, which I took from an article. I linked it below, and make sure to check it out. So I did not create this image, but we probably won't go through all these little details because, again, for us, they are less important. We don't have enough time. But a few things I want to show. So this is a baseline. It's basically like a horizontal line on which most of the, like all letters sit. And then they have ascender is like high parts of lowercase letters, and descenders is lower parts of lowercase letters. And then there is a cap height, is a height of a capital letter. And then there is a X height, is a height of lowercase letters. So these are quite important things to know. And these are little things that are called serifs, which you probably know too. So you can, if you want to learn more, please check out this article, which I included. Again, it's on our website. Everything that you see now, it's on our website. And a couple of books to read if you want to dive like really deep into typography. First one was recommended by Aga, The Elements of Typographic Style. And second one is the book I read. And yeah, I think it's a great book on typography. They're not related specifically to web design, so it's a lot of mostly probably about print, but they're very a lot of information there is really, really important to give you that foundation to understand how typography works. So if you have a lot of spare time, I would recommend to read these books.
Or a lot of
So,
interest. Maybe it could be
yeah,
a
and a lot of
nice
interest,
summer
obviously.
read.
Yeah,
Yeah.
summary, nice summary. Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about choosing fonts. Okay, one thing here is again, choosing your font is not like all of typography. It's a very, very, very first step, but it's an important step. And another quote I added here, which I like: words have meaning, type has spirit, the combination is spectacular. So, yeah, we have our copy, we have words, and we want to present them in a way that it all, makes sense and becomes a spectacular experience. So how do we choose fonts? Well, we'll quickly go through basic classification of fonts. I'll be very brief here. Serif fonts is the letters that have these little serifs. They were traditionally used in printed materials and usually give a more kind of like a classic look. Most common example, Times New Roman. And also at some point it was considered that they are not very good for web, for reading on screens, kind of like less preferred than sans serifs. But I think nowadays screens improved a lot, and it's like my personal opinion. It's not really a point. There are like amazing serif fonts that have very good readability. Then we have sans serifs. So these are letters that do not have these serifs, and as I said, they usually considered more legible on screens, but not necessary. And they often used in digital media, and they look a bit more modern. They look more minimalistic, obviously, and classic examples is Helvetica, Roboto, and lots of fonts, modern fonts. They are sans serif. Script fonts is the fonts that imitate handwriting or calligraphy, and sometimes they're divided in two groups: script, like handwriting fonts that more kind of like not letters are not uniform, like more imitate like not very neat handwriting, and other group is like more calligraphy style where all the letters are very uniform. But you can say call them all script fonts. They are mostly used for like branding elements and or like on invitations. You don't use them very often on in web projects, but they might be used as some decorative elements. Sometimes for some specific project they might work, but they're less common than serifs and sans serifs. And some example is Pacific or Dancing Script. Monospaced fonts, these are the fonts that basically you see when you're coding. And monospace fonts is each character takes up the same amount of horizontal space. So we know that letter I is narrow and letter M is wide, but in monospace fonts, each of these letters will take up, like it has an additional space around it if it's narrow, but they'll take up the same space. And it's kind of like, looks like a typewriter style, and it's used in coding. And examples are Space Mono, for example, but there are lots of others as well. Again, you usually don't use them in web design, but unless in some specific cases, you might find it useful. Like I really like monospaced fonts, and I was considering using one for my own website.
Yeah, I was thinking that's quite a cool feature. I didn't know that they, occupy the same sort of space, whether it's a
I
theme.
do like how they look, so I decided not to. Maybe I was wrong. Okay. So, and then display fonts, but I find that this category often overlap with others because they kind of can be serif and sans serif, and script. But the main characteristic, they were specifically created for large text, large display text. And what it means, don't no matter what, just don't use them for like body text, for smaller text, because that's not what they're made for. They have lower readability. And for example, there is Helvetica has a new family, and it has specific fonts. It's called display and text, and the difference, it's not so obvious, but if you know like where to look at, you'll see that display is it's kind of like tighter, has less space in between letters, so it was created specifically for big headings. And some of examples like impact and Xena, so like you can't use impact for your body text, that's for sure. General rules for choosing fonts. For most projects, 2 font families, so like 2 typefaces is enough. Like 1 for titles, 1 for body text. Sometimes you might want 3, but I won't go like any further than that. A rule of thumb: choose fonts that are known to be good, because it's a real science to create a font. And as we are not, I don't know, not me at least, I'm not a typography expert. I can't just look in the font, I can't tell how good it is. And what's the most important about font is readability. But yeah, I don't know. And I don't recommend choosing font just because it looks nice. You need to make sure, you need to check that the font is well known, it was created by well-known professionals, and it's safe to use.
That's actually the first thing that I said when you started the presentation, and you asked, okay, so how do we choose a font? And I posted in the chat, I was like, it looks nice, the end. So
Yeah,
I was gonna ask you, like, okay, choose a font that are known to be good, and you were saying like, okay, what to do to actually go and check whether a font is good or not. So would you recommend researching like the author? And
yeah, I research, I try to find information. So I either, there's 2 ways. I either find like some kind of like article or something with a source that I trust, obviously, that recommends specific fonts, and I pick font from there. Or if I just looking at them and choosing, which honestly I even rarely do. But if I just like choosing by the look, then when I chose something that looks nice, then I'll do like a research if that's an example of a good font. So yeah, and I definitely, like, at least especially in the beginning stages, I definitely recommend to stick to well-known fonts. The only thing is maybe there are some fonts that are really overused, and then you might not want to use them. As it comes with practice. And so yeah, find that balance. So for headings, we choose a font that matches your brand tone. So every font has some kind of type of character, and how to, how do you understand what kind of character it is? Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious. So the links below, I included some articles. There is some good information there about that. But yeah, you need to define your brand, right? At this point, you should have done that already. And then you try to find a font that kind of like, shows the same values and the same vibe and the same tone. And for body text, the most important thing is legibility, which we talked about before. It's how easy font to read. It's really like, if legibility is not good, then that's it. Like the font is a failure in this case. So most important, you want to have legibility, and usually like a very good legibility comes with very little character by default. But in any case, yeah, you don't really want your body font to express any specific ideas or whatever. All you want is to be easy to read and don't distract, actually. So for body font, we choose a highly legible font. And again, there are lists of them. Go there. And I would even say for title, okay, you can take your risk, and you can go for something that maybe in you, and you're not so certain. But for body, always stick to known to be good, always.
Would you say that also affects your first impression of a website? So I remember last week we were talking about catching the attention of your user kind of fairly quickly. Would you say the typography contributes to that?
Totally, yes, absolutely. Because again, that's almost a main part of even on a hero section. That's the thing you look at first is the title. So yeah, it totally contributes to that, and that's why it's very, very important that like your typography, you nailed it. So yeah, if you failed your typography, you basically failed the whole thing. That's for sure.
I guess we could say like imagine a welcome, imagine a door that has the welcome sign on top of it, and like the typography is one of those like horror ones, like the Halloween sort of writing welcome, and the other one is like, I don't know, a cute sans serif welcome, maybe a rounded font, I don't know, something more cutesy. Which door would you go into? Yeah, that sort of thing.
It creates that impression straight away. So yeah, it's very important. And also, I just want to say one thing again. You can use different methods when you start designing your website. But for me, until I pick my typography, I just can't progress further. Really, I can't, because for me typography is like, again, it's like the main visual element, and until I have some ideas how it's going to look like, I really can't think of anything else. So, and once if you chose your typography and you like chose your layout, and then it's really everything else just falls into places. You build everything around that. So okay, coming back to pairing fonts, what you should avoid is pairing two fonts that are too similar and they don't have any contrast. So they need to complement each other, but at the same time they need to be like different enough to create that contrast. So if you chose two different fonts but they really like look the same, that's kind of gonna look boring. Well, you also don't want them to clash in style, so like some kind of like toy shop font and something elegant, obviously they won't go together. Not bad choice for pairing. In many cases when we pair, we'll go for one serif and one sans serif. It's very often you'll see that, again, not always but often. And it used to be like few years back I was told that like go for sans serif for body text and serif for heading, but I repeat that I don't think it's a case now, and you can actually, there are fantastic serif fonts that have very good legibility. So yeah, and some fonts have families, for example, like PT serif and PT sans, I think they're called. It's like they have both sans serif and serif version, and that will be a good combination because they were like already created for each other. So another important point that maybe it's not so obvious is read font description. So when you find your font, for example on Google Fonts or somewhere else, and by the way, I use a lot of free fonts because there are so many good free fonts, but not all of them. That's why you need to stick to good ones. So yeah, read font description, because it'll be said what that font was created for. And sometimes if after you read that you just realize like, no, it doesn't really fit my project. And for you it might not be obvious why it doesn't fit your project, but if the font was created for something like very different. Well, sometimes the easiest example might say like font was created for large titles. Then, like again, it's display font, so don't use it for body. But sometimes it may be less obvious. But read font description; it will give you some information. Often, it will give you some information about font and help you to kind of like back your decision, or the opposite. And also when you choose your fonts, of course, do not forget. So when you chose a couple of fonts, usually typefaces, don't forget that there are other elements on the page, not just headings and not just body text. There are like labels, there are buttons, and most of times you can adapt the fonts you have for these elements, and there are lots of ways kind of like to make it look different but using the same typeface. You can use capital letters, right? You can use bold, italic, but if you feel like your pair that you chose doesn't really, cover it, you might, in this point, you might want to add some third one. So and overall this is very very short introduction to the topic, and that's why I included more resources. So there's an article about types of fonts, and this is I highly recommend. This is very good articles about how to pick fonts for your web project. So if you want more in-depth knowledge, please do check that out. It's great. It's a pretty old article by it's on Canva site, 30 cool font combinations, but I still come back to it like every now and then. I love it. There are some nice font combinations, and you can see how fonts work together with each other, how they complement each other, how this contrast is created. It's like there are some very good examples there. And also I won't touch Webflow as well. If you use Google Fonts, do not connect them to your, that there is that setting to your project, and there are several reasons for that. It's it might slow down the loading times, and also it's not compliant with like privacy laws. And what you need to do, you need to upload the files, and how to do that, you can check this video on BioFin And also I want to share one very great free font library. I really like it. I used a few fonts from there. It's called FontShare. So if you don't know it, check it out. There are some really cool fonts. And don't be afraid of Google Fonts also. I mean, like, I know some people might think like, oh, Google Fonts is like, it's not for serious projects. No, I don't agree. There are some really, really good fonts there, but again, you need to know which ones. Now we'll talk a bit more specifically. So what rules to apply to make your typography look great? And the main goal of typography always is readability. So basically all of that affects readability. So first, let's talk about scaling fonts. So you obviously want to create some kind of visual hierarchy with your fonts. You have different levels of headings, you have body text. And what I do not recommend to do, I do not recommend to take just random numbers. So you want to create that sense of harmony and consistency, and usually it's achieved by applying some kind of mathematical rule. So when you scale your fonts, there are different ways again, but usually you would start with your body text, something between 16 to 20 pixels most of times, and then you go from that and apply your system, and the system can be like multiplying by 1.25. It's one of ways, but there might be different like
Can it be
other
4?
ways.
I've done everything with multiplies of 4. Is that correct? Why am I doing that?
Oh yeah, multiple. Yeah, that's because that's a special number, especially for developers. Of course, so like one quarter of I think in numbers like 8, 16, 25, 32. I don't use numbers 10, 20, 30, 40. But I don't know, maybe it's personal because I'm a developer. So the system can be like you might define the smallest and largest, but then kind of like somehow in between. But you need to come up with some kind of system. One system I saw is when on smaller headings, each one is 8 pixel bigger, and then it becomes 12 pixel bigger, and then the largest heading it becomes 16 pixel bigger. So yeah, but whatever it is, it's always better to have a system rather than using random numbers. And why? Because I don't know, believe it or not, but I think subconsciously our brain can perceive that harmony, and lots of things in nature actually, they have some kind of rules too. So yeah, I believe that you can even feel that if numbers are random, or rather there is some certain system in it. And okay, and to make it easy for one thing I forgot. So if you want to create more kind of like energetic look, more give it, I don't know, more powerful, so you make that contrast between different sizes bigger. And if you want a bit more, something more kind of like professional, corporate style, you make that difference a bit smaller. And tools to use is a great tool. It's called TypeScale by Jeremy Church. So that's where you can apply. It has a free version, and you can apply, this different scaling system and easily scale your font. Okay, let's jump to alignment. So we can left align, center, or right align our text. Also, there is a justify, but it's not really used, to be honest. So this is a left aligned text, and left aligned text is how we read text in English, and it's the easiest to read. So whenever you can, use left align, because that really improves readability, and that's the way how we normally read. This is centered text. It's not that bad. It's okay, but there are some buts, like don't use it for big paragraphs, because it is harder to read. And if you have like a big paragraph of centered text, it won't be comfortable anymore. You can use it like for titles, subtitles, obviously it's often used, but again, keep text smaller. And also, not so obvious thing about it, even though it looks like it's balanced, actually when text is centered, you can see imperfection more, kind of like easier to see imperfection. And in fact, it might be a bit seem unbalanced, in fact, because there are like punctuation marks, which takes up space. And for example, this line looks a bit kind of like leaning to the left. So yeah, you can use it, but only for small pieces of small blocks of text, and not too often. And this is a right aligned text, and just don't use it. Like, don't ever use it unless you have some super creative website with some like brutalist style. Maybe maybe that will work, but in any normal day-to-day situation, just don't use right aligned text, because it's really, really hard to read, and there is no reason whatsoever to use right aligned text.
That's it. That's the one point that I've seen Irina being super not harsh about it, but super convinced of, like, okay, yeah, do whatever you want, do not right align your text.
Okay, I'll at the end I'll add a couple of words about all these rules, like as a whole thing. But okay, let's proceed for now. So proximity is used in design a lot. Okay, I'll try to hurry a bit. Proximity is used in design a lot, and basically that's a rule. It comes from Gestalt psychology, and it means that things that closer together they kind of like perceive as related to each other, and things that farther from each other they perceive as unrelated. And how we apply it in typography, this is one of the examples. So if you have a heading, the paragraph underneath should be closer to that heading, the heading it belongs to, rather than to other heading. And grouping this paragraph together with the heading above helps to emphasize their close relationship. It creates more sense in our mind and improves reading experience. So this is a correct way of an example of using proximity rule. So you see this this space here, it's bigger than this space here. And this is example which is not correct, and the space is equal everywhere. And I, by the way, see it quite often, but it's not right. Yeah, we understand, because we know how the text flows. We can understand which heading goes to which paragraph, but it's kind of create a bit of a, dissonance in our head. So this is a correct way to do it. Line length is a very important thing that affects readability. A line length is basically the number of characters that you can fit in a single line of text. If they're too long, it becomes too hard to follow from, when you come to the end of the line and you need to switch to the beginning, you might start losing lines, you might need to concentrate more. So we don't want it to be too long, but we don't want it to be too short either, because then kind of like it becomes all choppy and hard to read too. You, in your web projects, you can define the kind of like width of your text by by its container, or like the width of text block itself. That's what usually probably happens when you're designing in Figma. In Webflow, the other way, you can also like put it within a container, or you can use you can set a max width in characters that will keep it the text the width you want. And just a note here that one character, if you ever try to count them and it doesn't match, it's because one character is a unit of width that is equal the width of 0 character. So it's not how many actual characters in the line, it's how many zeros you would fit in that line. And recommended values here. For comfortable reading, we probably want to stay within like 50, 70 characters. It does depend on design as well, but we don't want to go, usually we don't want to go about 80 characters, and we don't want it to be too narrow, like probably even under 30 characters is a bit too narrow in most of cases. And this is an example. So this block of text is set to 60 characters, and it's comfortable to read and create a good experience. And why it's in many situations it's good to use these characters, because also they kind of like relative to the width of the to the size of the font. So for example, all the font this block of text, it also has a maximum width of 60 characters, but because the text kind of like the physical distance is bigger, but your reading experience is the same, because this text is bigger and this text is smaller. So that's example of 60 character, and that's example of what you never probably want to do. So for this font size, this is way too long. I don't know how many characters here, probably like over 100. That's way too long, and this is too short. So even if we have columns, we need to try to keep them like a bit wider than that. So line length affects readability a lot. What is another thing that affects readability? Line height. Often beginner's mistake is usually too small. Line height is too small. Somehow we kind of, I don't know why it happens, but what I see most of times, we need to give some space so it's comfortable to read, so we can like recognize it's easier to move through the text. What is line height at all? Line height is a vertical distance from the baseline of one line of text to the baseline of next line of text. So for example, so baseline, remember I showed you in that image. So baseline where all our letters sit. So from this baseline to this baseline. I don't set this in pixels, because then one day you decide to change your font to another value in pixels or rems, and you forget to change your line height, and then it'll all get messed up. So set it in percentage. In Figma, usually it's percentage I use, and in Webflow, set it in that kind of unitless number. So 150%, for example, it's 1.5. So this way, it doesn't matter how you change your font size, it doesn't affect like relative line height. The rule for line height is the bigger text needs a tighter line height. And why it happens? It happens because bigger text is more heavy visually, and it kind of like, again, a law of nature. It has bigger gravity, and kind of like, it's trying to keep closer to each other. So, well, that's explanation. I know it kind of makes sense to me. So bigger elements want to be a bit closer to each other because they have bigger gravity. Recommended values for large headings, I usually, most of times, it depends on font, but most of times I use something between 1 and 1.2, or between 100 and 120% height line. And for body text, in most of cases, it's between 140 and 160%. One little note is that for columns, we usually want to reduce line height a little bit comparing to like a bigger paragraphs. There is a tool for that helps you to calculate line height. It's pretty great. I find that it usually gives me a bit more than I want, but it's a good start. And yeah, okay, I won't go much through these examples, but you can see them on the website. So these are different line heights and how it looks. So start with these recommended values, and then just try to get that feel, like, does it feel right or not, and then adjust a bit more or less. Letter spacing, same thing. So if for body text, I wouldn't recommend, unless you really know what you're doing, I wouldn't recommend to mess with letter spacing. But for titles, you usually want it to be a bit tighter, again, because they're big, so letters want to be closer. And you specify it too in, like, not in pixel or in percentage or EM unit, so it's relative to font size. And for headings, usually I use something about -2, -3%, but it depends on font. So start with that and see how it looks like. One thing I forgot to say about line height, just make sure that your ascenders and descenders don't overlap, don't touch each other. It sometimes happens, so that's no good. Okay, we nearly finished. Orphan words. These are single words that kind of like go into next line, and they're lonely and they're poor orphans, and usually it's no good because it's just awkward. It's just awkward, and you don't worry about that much in Figma usually, but in Webflow, when you building, you can apply text wrap pretty, and that's here's the difference, how it looks without it, how it looks with it. So it just takes another word from previous, kind of like spreads them out a bit, and the text takes a word from another line, and it looks slightly better. So text wrap pretty is great and safe to use, and I use it all the time. For headings, you can also use text wrap balance, which makes the lines similar, kind of like width, but the downside is it can change the overall width of your heading. Like, it can make it almost like twice as narrow as it was before that. And if your title, for example, on a kind of like on a card, or on some kind of background, it might look a bit weird. So just be careful with that. Apply it to headings, but make sure to check on all screen widths that it looks fine. Okay, Claudia, what do we do?
After you, my dear. Do you want to do you want to?
This is the last part.
Yeah.
If you give me 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's up to you.
Okay, special characters. I see that all the time. Special characters get all mixed up, and the wrong characters are used where they shouldn't be. So hyphen, quickly, hyphen is this is the actual sign on the keyboard, next to plus. And hyphens are usually only used within one word, or like when it's a line break, it breaks the word. So they will be inside a word, like well-known reenter, this type of, and there is no spaces around it. M dash, it's a bit wider one, and it's actually called N dash because it's a width of letter N. So here we have all, I included how to actually type this character. So it's option and this minus sign. This one is used for like ranges and or like between this, from this to this. So 2015, 2020 or Monday to Friday. And it doesn't require space around it. M dash is the widest one. And we see it a lot nowadays because AI loves it so much apparently. But I do love it too, you know, and I've been using it for much longer than AI.
AI Irina.
Yeah. So this one is often used in places, you know, instead of commas or parentheses or colons. It's kind of like it can create an emphasis and can introduce a clause and can like give some extra information. I wasn't sure until now. She gave it her all, every last bit of effort. So it's more kind of like, you know, your tone. So in this is the one that I see most of times, like very often hyphens used instead of that, for example, but this is not
Which
correct.
I think is a bit problematic now that lots of people associate em dashes
This is
with AI.
problematic because now I'm trying to avoid M dash.
Me too. I stopped using them because it's like I don't want people to think I'm a bot, which they already do anyway, but I'm not. So
But I don't know. Yeah, that's a tricky situation because I love M dashes. They actually add a bit of a kind of like a flow to that text, but okay. Ampersand. So it should be used in things like company names, titles, or like logos, abbreviations. In a normal text, like text on your website, it should not be used. Ideally, it should not be used. And it wasn't created for that. It's not an actual, you know, a word, and it creates accessibility problems because you might be surprised, but for some people it's harder to recognize, especially people who having like general problems reading. So it's much easier and more accessible to see "and" rather than this type of sign. So I personally, I see it sometimes, but in rare situation it feels kind of like appropriate, but I personally don't recommend use it in like in a formal writing instead of "and."
I had no idea that was called ampersand. I always called it the fancy
I see. Okay, and there is this bit about curly quotes. Again, often use the wrong ones. The ones that on our keyboards, they are straight quotes, and these are basically just little lines, straight lines. And curly quotes were created specifically for this typeface, and they have the same feel, you know. So that's what should be used for like opening and closing quotes. And I gave all the combinations of how to use them. Okay, last thing, non-breaking space. Sometimes we don't want things to break between lines, like 100 kilometers or Dr. Smith, New York, or sometimes I don't like breaking between article and noun. In some situation, I would put non-breaking space there. It prevents, so if you put a non-breaking space here, for example, when 100 kilometers, when it goes to next line, it goes all together. Otherwise, like it might 100 stay here, kilometers stay there, it just looks weird. So breaking space, again, it's important when you develop. And in Webflow, I unfortunately, I don't know if it's same in Windows or not, but on Mac, you press Shift space instead of space, and that will create a breaking space. So some additional learning here about punctuation, special characters. And I want to finish with a quote again. Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist, by Pablo Picasso. So yeah, once you mastered all that, you can start breaking them, but only then.
And with
Thank you.
that, round of applause. Love that. That's such a like drop the mic quote. Love it. Oh, thank you so much, Irina. I know that it was really hard to pack so much knowledge into such a short time, and you did an absolutely fantastic job. So thank you so much, and all the resources and all the time that you took to even again to create the website, which is still like blows my mind that you were able to just like, yeah, sure, I'll build a website for the thing in a week, and this is just like the sort of level of talent that we have here. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
absolutely. And if anyone would like to dive deeper, please do explore all the amazing resources that both Aga and Irina have sourced for you. I know that we have 3 minutes left. What do we want to do? One question, and then maybe we can review week 1 and week 2 on the next live stream, or should we look at Emma's layout?
Let's look at Emma's layout. It'll be interesting.
Alrighty. Cool. Emma, you're up.
Yes, cool. So, Irina, how do you want to do this? You want me to share the link into the hidden
just
file?
share your screen and
share my screen. Okay.
talk us through.
Do you want to walk up on stage, Emma? To add complexity? No, don't worry, it's fine.
Actually, let me open that file. Because I did a couple different layouts, and I was just curious on how you would choose the font, because the font pairing, I tend to really struggle with it. I tend to go towards fonts that are a little bit less formal. Let's say it like that. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So I went in 3 directions. Like a very traditional layouts, just tried different organizations of those images. And then I went with like this kind of thing, because I felt, later down in the body of this website, I can really do some stuff with this kind of layout, different circles and different packaging and all that kind of stuff. And I noticed that next week's homework we're not continuing the same website, which I was a little bit sad about, because I was thinking, when we're done with this summer camp, I'm going to have another project I can put in my portfolio, but it's fine. And then I went in a totally different direction, just to play with layout really, really hard, really differently than I had done above.
Maybe that's a good point. Maybe you can still adapt, or you can still use, I'm sure we're very good at bending the rules here. So if you want to use the same website, I'm going to ask permission to my masters here, but what do you guys think?
I didn't mention for next this week challenge is, because we're talking about typography, I would love for you to design some kind of like a long read page. But even like for this website, where Emma, you could use like blog. There might be a blog there, right? So you can create a blog page for this website within this style. And by the way, I love it. That's so creative. This, for color, these things, like it looks really, really cool. Good morning. Here.
So for example, this font, like I felt, okay, it's kind of like granola, right? But I don't really know if it should be, easier to read or all caps, or sometimes I'm just not sure. Do you want to speak about that?
Well, I just recommend, because I don't really have time now, but I recommend that article that I included about font pairing by Eric Kennedy.
Okay.
His name. So I really recommend you to read that one, because it has some good points. And also, like he says, for example, that do not, follow the vibe, but do not take it like too far. So you need to find that balance where it's kind of like creates the mood, but not too much of that mood.
I kind of like this desktop 10. I think you can definitely make the image a little bit more like hump up the opacity, so that the text, maybe you can add a layer, like a dark layer on top of the image.
There is one. There's
some decent contrast.
Yeah, I put it, but you're talking about more of a contrast.
Yeah, a bit more, maybe darker.
It's harder to read. Yeah.
Really
because
cool.
thanks. I wasn't sure if I should, go more serious or be less. Yeah, because I know what you mean, Irina. That's typically my problem, is that I hit it too on the nose. Is like, oh, is it a bird website? Oh, then I'll make it look kind of like a bird. You know, it's just like, no. So I was interested to see if you had any strong thoughts about any of this.
But then it's down to the client as well. Maybe this cafe that you're designing on Desktop 10 is for like a hipster cafe, or like somebody who wants to be a little bit more pop. Maybe hipster is the wrong, but just like maybe that's the different brief that you were given, because they're like, both of them are really valid, but they're completely different styles, right? So they could be completely different clients.
Yeah, this is more sort of upscale.
And if I may add something, according to the last lecture of Irina, it was mentioned that the hero section should catch the attention, and yours definitely does it. So good job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, girls, we are at time. So thank you so much, Emma, for sharing your work. It's always great to see that. And for everyone else, to be here and investing this time into your own growth and learning, that's always very commendable. So thank you all so much. We won't be here next week, but we are going to have a final lesson before we all wrap up for the summer, because it's getting a little bit too hot for everyone to be standing here or sitting here. So our final lesson is going to be about colors. Woo, we love colors. But it's not going to be next Wednesday, but the one after. So you got a little bit of extra time to exercise a little bit more. We have a thread open in our forum, so feel free to keep working with our Floxies. And the lovely Aga is hosting the office hour. When is it again, Aga?
Our summer camp office hour is on Monday. It's 5 p.m. GMT +2. So, but in the Discord channel, you have the proper time according to your time zone. So we are going to meet on Monday. So feel free to join the thread and share your work that you created so far. And see you near our swimming pool area on Monday. We'll chill.
Oh, we could all go with a little swimming pool right now. All right, lovelies. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you very soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.